Comme il est 13h59, conformément.
It being 1:59, pursuant to order adopted earlier today, the question is deemed put and a deferred recorded division is deemed requested until today at the end of question period.
Déclaration de député. The honourable member for Mississauga Lakeshore.
Madam Speaker, in January, I visited the Rohingya refugee camps in Cox's Bazar. 900,000 people, the population of Mississauga, crammed into 34 small camps. 500,000 children and about 60 babies born each day. It's the largest refugee response in the world. The camps are going into their third monsoon season. Flood control and sanitation systems have been built. Food, water, and medical care are being provided. More good news came in the form of the recent ICJ ruling and Bangladesh's decision to allow better education programming. I thank the government of Bangladesh and local host community, the government of Canada, and my host, World Vision, for their leadership. Our special envoy, Bob Ray, is doing extraordinary work, and we have an amazing team of public servants on the ground. And yet the future remains uncertain for the Rohingya. So I ask my colleagues in this House to be their champions, to explain to our constituents why Canada has taken a leadership role, and to help ensure that the children in Cox's Bazar will have a much brighter future. Thank you, Madam.
The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to inform the House of the sombre news of the sudden passing of Donna Horning in my community of Kelowna Lake Country. Donna was an active member of our community. She was the former president and founding member of the Kelowna Cassagai Sister City Association and former member of the Kelowna Windham Sister City Association. Donna also volunteered extensively in many political avenues and was a strong woman of principle with a big heart. She was the wife of Al Horning, who served in our community in office at the municipal, provincial, and federal level as a fellow member of this House in the 39th Parliament. Donna and Al were teenage sweethearts and had 3 children in their 59-year marriage. Donna's celebration of life will take place on April 18th at 1 p.m. at the Rutland Centennial Hall on what would have been the Hornings' 60th anniversary. I wish my sincere condolences to Al and his family during this difficult time, and I ask my colleagues in this House to join me in doing so as well.
The honourable member for... The honourable member for... She's not up. He's not up, yes, but he's... L'honorable député...
The honourable member for...
The honourable parliamentary secretary? No.
Yes.
The honourable parliamentary secretary to the government house leader?
So, thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, 1870 was a special year. That's the year Manitoba joined Confederation. That's 150 years ago, Madam Speaker. And when I think of Manitoba, I think of miles and miles of canola and wheat fields. I think of the polar bears and the beluga whales from Churchill. Communities like Neepawa, Flin Flon, my home city of Winnipeg and Portage in Maine, and all those historical events that have taken place over there. I think of an economy that's diversified. Think about electric buses or the best milk production in the world, I would argue, Mr. Speaker. But most importantly, it's the people that make up the province of Manitoba. Indigenous people who were there first, Mr. Speaker, to the individuals of French and English roots, to our Ukrainian, Filipino, Punjabi, or Indian communities, heritage communities, Mr. Speaker. It is that multicultural fabric that makes Manitoba the great province it is, and I encourage all Manitobans across Canada to recognize this year as a special year and take a moment to reflect on the wonderful province of Manitoba.
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. The Bloc Québécois would like to mark the occasion of Teachers' Week. This is an opportunity to pay tribute to the work of all teachers in Quebec who dedicate themselves to educating our children year after year. This year, the theme of the week is 1,216,791 good reasons to thank them. That's exactly how many students there are currently in Quebec schools. And the theme is appropriate because they're the ones, the students, each and every one of them, who are the priority day after day. I myself was a teacher for nearly 30 years, so I know firsthand how much heart and energy these men and women invest in each and every child. It's a privilege, but also a huge responsibility, guiding each of these young people in their community towards success. That is why, on behalf of the Bloc Québécois, it's a pleasure for me to say a huge thank you to all of our teachers.
L'honorable député de Vaudreuil.
The honourable member for Vaudreuil-Soulanges. Mr. Speaker, it's an honour for me to rise today to recognize the work of an organization as important as the Maison de la Famille in Vaudreuil-Soulanges. This organization is a pillar for families in my community. By offering tailor-made services that are, for the most part, free of cost, it contributes to the best possible development of our children at every conceivable stage of their growth. This year, I also have the privilege to have been chosen as honorary president for the 5th edition of À Table en Famille. This event will allow thousands of families in Vaudreuil-Soulanges to continue to have access to quality services that support parents and children. So I invite all my constituents to join me, my family, France Pomainville, Diane Lyonnais, and the entire team from Maison de la Famille in Vaudreuil-Soulanges on February 16th at this fun-filled event. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, some of our colleagues have been spreading much misinformation about Teck's Frontier Mine project, so I wanted to take a moment and correct some of it. Teck is indeed building 2,600,000 barrel a day mine in northern Alberta and will invest $20 billion to build it. Wow. Alberta needs new investment and 7,000 construction jobs, as well as the 2,500 in operation that follow, Mr. Speaker. Here's some facts that have been left out. One of the lowest water use intensities in the oil sands, lower carbon emissions intensity than about half of oil currently refined in the U.S., reclaiming land as mining progresses, and leading-edge tailings management. Did you know that 14 local Indigenous communities are supportive of the project, Mr. Speaker? Approve this project, and let's get on with shipping Canadian energy to the world.
The honourable member for Vancouver Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today is the International Day for the Elimination of Female Genital Mutilation. FGM-C is a violation of human rights, affecting more than 200 million women and girls worldwide. In 1997, the Liberal government criminalized FGM in Canada. Now, we are engaging with other nations, donors, UN organizations, and civil society to take action to eliminate FGM globally. Canada has co-sponsored the African Union-led UN General Assembly resolution entitled Intensifying the Global Efforts for the Elimination of FGM. And we currently fund projects in Benin, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Iraq through community-based education and awareness campaigns. More needs to be done. Ending FGM requires governments to act with legislation to protect the human rights of governments and girls, with policies that empower women and girls, and most importantly, in this year of Beijing Plus 25, to remember that women's rights are human rights.
The honourable member for Newmarket, Aurora.
Mr. Speaker, on October 27th, the town of Newmarket came together as a community for Hugs for Hope. I'm proud to have been part of a team of 8 that hugged for 1 hour with our neighbors and our friends and our family, exchanging over 4,008 hugs. The event was a huge success, raising over $6,000 for 2 incredible charities: Youth Speak, serving youth with mental health and addiction issues, and Global Strides, which supports an orphanage and impoverished children in Kenya. I'm thrilled to announce to the House that on January 30th, we received confirmation that Hugs for Hope Newmarket broke the Guinness World Record for the most hugs for 8 people in 60 minutes. I'd like to congratulate the participants of HoC for Hope Newmarket on their remarkable achievement, and I thank them for reminding us that the best place in the world is inside a hug. I invite my colleagues here in the House to stand up and give someone a hug.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, I think Canada's entire energy sector should come together in a vast national consultation sponsored by the federal government. We need to have the guts to talk about the energy sector.
À l'ordre.
Order.
À l'ordre.
Order.
Order. It's wonderful to see everyone taking advice about hugging, and it's a great way to start off just before question period. But I'm just going to ask one favor. Would you mind hugging in silence, please? Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, I think Canada's entire energy sector should come together in a vast national consultation sponsored by the federal government. We need to have the guts to talk about the energy sector and stop burying our heads in the sand. Right now, unfortunately, this is a divisive issue in Canada when it should be something that unites us all from coast to coast to coast. I invite parliamentarians of all stripes to open this dialogue with all players and stakeholders in the energy sector to develop a serious strategy for Canada's energy future by creating a national commission on energy security. Our Canadian approach to energy will drive the economic destiny of future generations and our position on the world stage. Let's do our job as legislators in this House and call on the government to show some leadership for the well-being of Canadians and for our economic prosperity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Louis. Mr. Speaker, I rise today on a sad note to honour a legend of the Canadian financial sector. We learned that Quebec banker Jacques Ménard passed away on Tuesday evening. Mr. Ménard held a number of executive positions over the years, including chairman of the board of Hydro-Quebec, the Montreal Stock Exchange, Trans-Canada Options Corporation, and the Investment Dealers Association of Canada. Mr. Ménard was president of the Bank of Montreal, became a member of the Order of Canada in 1995, and, as a sports fan, was also chairman of the Montreal Expos. Jacques' legacy will live on in Quebec and Canada. I offer my condolences and those of this House to all his loved ones.
Honourable Member for Saskatoon University.
Mr. Speaker, Teck Resources has a $20 billion project in a struggling region of Canada, a project that will provide 7,000 jobs during construction and over 2,500 jobs for decades to come. And yet, despite these benefits, the media are reporting that behind the veil of secrecy, Liberal MPs are pushing the government to block the Teck mine. The Liberal members from Beachy East York and the Parliamentary Secretary for Industry are actively lobbying the Prime Minister to block these new jobs. When it came to SNC, the Prime Minister was willing to interfere with criminal prosecution, and I quote, make sure there are good jobs across Canada. And when any Liberal MP stood in his way, he booted him from cabinet and then caucus. It is time for this Prime Minister to tell his backbenchers to support our resource sector and get the Cabinet to approve this critical project today.
The Honourable Member for Perth Wellington.
Mr. Speaker, for nearly 50 years, Dr. Peter HoC was the leading scholar of Canadian constitutional law. Professor and later Dean at Osgoode Hall Law School, Professor HoC was known in this precinct for his wise advice to members on both sides of the House and his clear testimony to committees. His major treatise, The Constitutional Law of Canada, remains the definitive source on the topic owing to its clear and careful reading of judicial case law and his searing insight into jurisprudence. His many accolades include the Nitition Award, named for the distinguished former Governor-General and Minister of Justice who once sat in this House. Dr. HoC recognized throughout his long career that the responsibility for advancing and protecting the rule of law, one of the great inheritances we share as Canadians, lies here in this House. As his adopted country, Canada benefited from the lifetime of scholarship and service of Dr. Peter HoC. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Well, member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, I'd like to highlight two initiatives in my hometown of Penticton that have really made a difference to community arts and culture. One is Peach City Radio, CFuzz, a community radio station that on February 1st celebrated its first anniversary of being on the airwaves. In this age of big corporate ownership of our media, it's wonderful to have a strong local voice on air run entirely by talented and dedicated volunteers. And secondly, I want to give a shout out to the Dream Cafe, a small but mighty place that CBC Radio has ranked as one of the top 3 music venues in this country. Wow. Founded by the dynamic pair of Pierre Couture and Deborah Rice, the Dream now operates as a cooperative and hosts the best of Canadian and international music. Some of the top names in music have played regularly in this beautiful cafe. Jeff Healey, Michael Casehammer, Judy Collins, Murray McLaughlin, Jan Arden, and more. If you want good music and good radio, come to Penticton.
Nice. The Honourable Member for Abitibi, James Bay, Nunavik, EU. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to pay tribute to Daniel Gagné, who passed away in the wee hours of February 4th. Daniel was a counsellor, mentor, a travelling companion in the election campaign. He was a man of conviction and honour. He had an exceptional journey through life with a 50-year constant commitment to the social, cultural, artistic, and political life of his native Abitibi. He was a good friend to the Indigenous communities who also feel his loss. As a painter, poet, singer, sculptor, writer, photographer, and archivist, he created and staged his own life with self-confidence and determination. Daniel put his art to the service of memory, pictorial memory of the landscapes of his native Abitibi, sound and musical memory of moods and the spirit of the time, memory of origins, of identity, of a country, of a territory, of human solidarity. He will remain in the memory of all those who knew him. My deepest sympathies to his wife, Nicole, and his family. Rest in peace, my dear Danielle. The Honourable Member
Mr. Speaker, Canada's Conservatives are hearing the legitimate concerns from Canadians from coast to coast to coast on the actions of the People's Republic of China towards its people in the world. Between trade sanctions, arbitrary detention of Canadians, crackdown on legitimate protests, and concentration camps for Uyghur Muslims, Canadians are questioning our current relationship with China.
Yes, they are.
Last night at the Canada-China Committee, we heard from Ambassador Barton, who admitted the relationship was broken. Yet he gave us very little reassurance that this Liberal government has a coherent plan or strategy. Even the Minister of Foreign Affairs said that there is no framework for dealing with China. Their ambassador expressed little knowledge on critical topics, such as the situation in the South China Sea or a long outstanding consular case. This government is dangerously naive when it comes to dealing with China. Canadians expect a framework that protects their interests and human rights around the globe.
Right.
People can rest assured that there are voices in this Parliament, Mr. Speaker, who hear their concerns and will fight for human rights and the rule of law.
Every day.
Member for Etobicoke North.
February 11th marks the United Nations International Day of Women and Girls in Science. It is past time to celebrate the amazing women and girls who have chosen to pursue science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and innovation, to end the discrimination they often face, to recognize their remarkable accomplishments, and to ensure they receive equal pay for work of equal value. Canada has innumerable women explorers, leaders, pioneers, and scientists, from astronaut Dr. Roberta Bondar to Canada's most recent Nobel Prize winner, Professor Donna Strickland, and only the third woman in history to win the Physics Prize. Today and always, let's ensure we live up to Canada's New Dimensions Charter and that we measure progress. And to my sisters in science, know you have a champion and an ally. Let's inspire the next generation to discover, because more than ever, the world needs science, and science needs women.
Oral questions. Question orale, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are still concerned about the Liberal plan to create a panel to censor media content. Even though the Liberals are now backpedaling, the plan clearly recommends that the government have the power to penalize media that it doesn't deem trustworthy. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit could all face government censorship of their online content. Will the Prime Minister promise that he won't implement any of those recommendations that would censor internet content? The Honourable Minister of Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government will always support a strong, free, and independent media. This report from an independent panel specifically proposes exempting news media from licensing requirements. Allow me to be clear, if we haven't already been clear, our intention is not to impose any licensing requirements on news media, nor will we regulate their content.
Speaker, that is a very narrow rejection of just one recommendation. There are multiple recommendations in this report that propose codes of conduct, regulations, and fines for other types of media content and other types of platform. Now, can the Prime Minister expand beyond this narrow rejection of just the question of licensing? This goes beyond that to other forms of codes of conduct, other aspects of this report that would restrict free speech. Will the Minister reject all the recommendations?
The Honourable Minister.
I said it in French. I will say it in English, Mr. Speaker. Our government believes in a strong, free, and independent press. The report we received from an independent panel specifically exempted news media from licensing requirements, and our government has said very clearly that we will not impose licensing requirements on news organization, nor will we regulate news content. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The opposition. Mr. Speaker, the fact that he can't go beyond that one narrow rejection and talk about the other forms of restrictions on free speech is very telling. We're not just talking about the independence of the press, we're talking about every single Canadian's right to have free speech online. This report is also proposing codes of conduct and letting government determine, quote, trusted content. Now, when the Minister of Heritage can't even be trusted to get his answers straight, why would Canadians want him to tell them which sites can be trusted?
The Honourable Minister of Heritage. Mr. Speaker, we welcome the recommendations from this independent panel, and I will be happy to sit with members of the opposition to look at the bill that we will put on the table in the very near future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Now, Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister said something in this House that simply was not true. He said that in the TMX case, the courts had ruled that free, prior, and informed consent did not constitute a veto. They did no such thing. The court ruled that the duty to consult did not grant a veto. Now, a United Nations declaration that this government is planning on proposing will, in fact, require free, prior, and informed consent and will give one group that does not want to proceed with a project an effective veto. So, will the Liberals abandon their plans to implement this UN resolution?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I was honored to receive in my mandate letter from the Prime Minister the task of implementing UNDRIP into our Canadian law. One of our priorities, therefore, is to introduce co-developed legislation to implement UNDRIP by the end of 2020. Mr. Speaker, we will be engaging with Canadians, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, and working in partnership, in particular with Indigenous peoples, to make the declaration a reality in Canada as a framework for reconciliation.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the court ruling was very clear. The dozens and dozens of First Nations community who supported this project have a right to see it proceed. And it is this government's plan to implement a United Nations resolution that would require free, prior, and informed consent from every single group. So can the minister explain what happens if one of those communities withholds their consent?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, implementing UNDRIP is a priority for this government. Free, prior, and informed consent is, Mr. Speaker, one of the key provisions of that. I would ask, Mr. Speaker, that the Leader of the Opposition look at what's happened with Bill 41 in British Columbia with an implementation of UNDRIP, and in which free, prior, and informed consent is not considered to be a veto.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, during the election, the Prime Minister said that he wouldn't challenge Bill 21 for the moment, but the time has come apparently to challenge the bill, and this time using Quebec taxpayer money. This morning, François Legault said that the Prime Minister is insulting Quebecers. He said, "This is not without consequence. This is a challenge to a law that was passed with the support of the nation of Quebec." My question is simple. Does the government recognize that it should not be challenging Bill 21 with Quebec taxpayers' money, especially when it goes against the desires of Quebecers? The Honourable Minister of Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would remind my colleague that the Court Challenges program is a fully independent and non-political program. We have no role to play in the allocation of funds or the way criteria for the program are defined. Those decisions are made by an independent committee of experts who ensure that the program is administered in an impartial, independent way. I think that my colleagues should understand that concept of independence well. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, Tuesday, in response to the block, the Minister of Justice said that it would be okay to challenge Bill 21. He said there are Quebecers who are currently challenging the bill before the courts, and that's the right thing to do. The next day, we learned that the English Montreal School Board would be challenging Bill 21 with Ottawa money. That's our money. So will the minister be transparent and finally say whether yes or no he supports a challenge of Bill 21, regardless of where it comes from? The Honourable Government House Leader. As has been said a number of times, Bill 21 is a bill that was tabled by the Government of Quebec in the National Assembly. It was debated by Quebecers, and it's now in force in Quebec. It is being challenged by other Quebecers. So we're just monitoring the situation, Mr. Speaker. That's all we're doing. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Mr. Speaker, once again, nearly 50 workers have lost their jobs. And more than that, they've lost their benefits because this government is refusing to change the bankruptcy law.
Furniture has filed for bankruptcy, which means nearly 50 workers are going to lose their jobs, and that means they're also going to lose their benefits. For some workers, that means losing as much as $50,000. When will this Liberal government stop prioritizing bankers and financiers and instead change the bankruptcy laws to protect working people and their families?
Hear, hear. The Honourable the Honourable Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, as the member opposite has raised, we know that individuals are going through some difficult times, particularly individuals that are subjected to the bankruptcy law. That is why in Budget 2019 we took important steps to make insolvency proceedings fair and more transparent, like ensuring better oversight over corporate behavior. We understand that protecting Canadian and Canadian workers is a priority, and will continue to do that, Mr. Speaker.
For Burnaby South.
Monsieur le Président, nous avons
Mr. Speaker, we asked the Liberal government how much they spent to take First Nations children to court. They said $5 million. But when Cindy Blackstock asked the same question, they said over $8 million.
How much is this government spending on taking First Nations kids to court? Is it over $5 million that they told us, or is it over $8 million that they told Cindy Blackstock? My question is simple. How much money is this Liberal government spending taking First Nations kids to court?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, we fully agree that we must compensate First Nations children harmed by past government policies. The Department of Justice, Mr. Speaker, has a consistent formula that officials use to calculate legal costs in all these matters. As we have said previously, Mr. Speaker, our focus remains on finding a fair and equitable solution for First Nations children who have been negatively impacted by child and family policies. That remains the same.
Honourable Member for Richmond Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, we've learned that 2 Canadians contracted coronavirus on a Japanese cruise ship with 3,700 passengers on board, including 251 Canadians. 2 of those Canadians are Diane and Bernard Ménard, a couple from Gatineau who are currently confined to their cabin. The problem is that Ms. Bernard's health could deteriorate because she no longer has her diabetes medication. Can the Prime Minister tell us if he has a plan to help these Canadians who were caught in a very risky situation on this ship? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for his important question. This is obviously a situation that we're monitoring very closely. As you know, the health and safety of Canadians abroad is a priority for us. We know that we have 255 Canadians on that boat, and consular officials are currently in contact with each one of those individuals to provide any consular assistance necessary. We will always be there for Canadians abroad.
Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday during question period, the Prime Minister called Ambassador Dominic Barton a deep expert in how we are going to move forward on improving the situation of Canadians in China. But when asked about the detention of Hussein Chalil, Barton claimed that Chalil was not a Canadian citizen. Chalil's citizenship is not acknowledged by China because he happens to be a dual national. But a Canadian is a Canadian. Does the Prime Minister still have confidence in his ambassador, and will he set the ambassador straight about Mr. Chalil's citizenship?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Canadian would agree that a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian, Mr. Speaker. And I'm happy that on this side of the House we start to understand that. We are deeply concerned about Mr. Cecil, Mr. Speaker, and we will continue to raise this case at every opportunity at senior levels, Mr. Speaker. We will continue to call upon the Chinese government to give Canadian official consular access in order to determine his well-being and offer him assistance, like we will do for every Canadian, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
The question was not about buzzwords, it was about citizenship. The ambassador told the committee yesterday that this Canadian citizen who has been in prison for 15 years and has never met his youngest son was not a Canadian citizen. So could the minister stand in his place at the very least and set the ambassador straight, tell us that he believes Mr. Chalil to be a citizen, and tell him that he will call the ambassador and tell him to recognize publicly the Canadian citizenship of this long-detained Canadian.
Mr. Canadian, I think everyone in this House recognizes that Mr. Cecil is a Canadian. We will always stand up for Canadians. We recognize he is a Canadian. We will provide consular assistance. We will continue to assist him like we would do for every Canadian around the world, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Calgary Heritage.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister said law enforcement officers cannot seize gun licenses. He is wrong. An RPAL or PAL is invalidated when it's seized by police for public safety, and that person has no ability at law to possess or acquire any firearm. Will the Prime Minister now admit that Canada has long had legal options to seize firearms in public safety scenarios and apologize for misleading this House yesterday?
Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. Red flag laws save lives. I've actually used those sections of the criminal code to seize firearms in these dangerous situations. And I can also advise you, Mr. Speaker, of the limitations of those laws. Mr. Speaker, we know that the average assaulted woman in Canada is assaulted 25 times in a domestic relationship before the police are in fact called. 70% of firearm deaths in this country are suicides. And we know that there are people exploiting violence and hatred against visible minorities. Mr. Speaker, these laws will empower Canadians to take action to render a dangerous situation, a potentially deadly situation, safe.
Honorable député. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-des-Etchemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, the Minister should apply the existing rules because apparently he's not familiar with the law. The law is already clear. Police can suspend a firearms license and they can prevent someone who has mental health issues or links to crime from acquiring a firearm in the first place. The law is clear, so nothing needs to be changed. Why attack honest citizens instead of tackling the real problem, street gangs?
Public safety.
Force the laws to Mr. Speaker, anyone who suggests in the face of the constant threat that women in abusive relationships face from the potential of firearms in the home, the individuals who lose their life to suicide, for anyone to suggest nothing needs to be done, Mr. Speaker, is unconscionable. Mr. Speaker, red flag laws have overwhelmingly proven their effectiveness because they empower more than just the limited authority of the police, but they give victims, families, teachers, doctors, elders the opportunity to intervene and to keep people safe.
I know some of us in the House have short memories, but the way it works is you ask a question and then you get an answer. Whether you like the answer is irrelevant, but you shouldn't be shouting back and forth while the answer is being given or while the question is being asked. I just want to remind everyone, just in case they forgot that principle. The Honourable Member for Medicine Hat, Carson Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, if you recall, I rose to point out that the Prime Minister was misleading Canadians on firearms. That's right. Public safety should not be a political game. Absolutely. It is our duty in this House to get the facts right to protect Canadians. The current law is very clear. If a firearm owner poses a threat, authorities can confiscate firearms and suspend licenses, preventing further purchases of firearm or possession. If our public safety minister actually had a PAL or an RPAL, he'd already know this instead of trying to develop what he's doing. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister rise, apologize, and correct the record?
Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I will admit I'm not a recreational firearm user, but I have actually enforced and used these laws to keep communities and people safe. And what I can tell you, the authority that exists in law.
Okay, please continue.
The laws that are currently available that enable law enforcement to seize firearms and to revoke a license are limited in their application, Mr. Speaker. And it is only in the circumstances where reasonable probable grounds exist and only in circumstances where a seizure of a firearm has taken place that a firearm can be revoked. And the practical application of that, Mr. Speaker, is that until there's been a return to a justice and that information is conveyed to the Chief Firearms Officer, that license can be...
Député de la Prairie.
The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, just a few minutes ago, we learned that the English Montreal School Board had turned down the federal money to challenge Bill 21. Even they thought that that didn't make sense. Imagine. So I hope that they will realize that it doesn't make sense either. What I would like the government to do is to commit to stop funding any form of court challenge to Bill 21 in the future. Leave Quebecers alone, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, I would remind my colleague some of the things that the Bloc Québécois said about the Court Challenges program. They said it's a program that has shown its value and has allowed people's values to be defended. They also said that it's an important tool for communities to fight assimilation and the loss of their language. And finally, they said that the Court Challenges program is an ally against those who would undermine Francophone minority rights in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Laurentides-Labelle. Mr. Speaker, it's unacceptable to use our taxpayer money to fund a challenge against Bill 21. It's probably also against the rules. To get funding for the Court Challenges program, English Montreal School Board was supposed to show that they had a financial need. But the English Montreal School Board has a $365 million budget, $320 million of which comes directly from the Quebec government. So, Mr. Speaker, how could the English Montreal School Board have obtained money to challenge the Quebec government?
L'honorable leader du gouvernement.
The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I just want to correct something that was said at the end. The school board never received a cent, and what they're saying is incorrect. Second thing, when my colleague says leave Quebecers alone, well, I'm as much a Quebecer as he is, and so are the Liberal members from Quebec. We are not less Quebecer than they are. So what did the Bloc say about the Court Challenges program? They said that the program is an essential tool. It exists to support fairness. It supports constitutional fairness, and so on and so forth. The Honourable Member for Laurentides de la Belle. Mr. Speaker, the problem is not the Court Challenges program. It's a good program. Yes. But it's supposed to help those who really need it, not an organization that has a budget of $365 million. Can we agree on that? Giving $125,000 to the school board and funding a partisan lawsuit against Bill 21 is unacceptable. Now that we know that federal money is available to challenge secularism, well, Mr. Speaker, we want to know what other organizations have received this money. Honourable Minister of Heritage. So there was some inaccurate information put forward by my colleague. The English Montreal School Board did not receive any money through this program. I never thought I would have to rise in this Parliament to do this, but I am going to talk about an important concept, which is independence. That means that someone is not related to someone else and has no accountability to anyone else, just like the Court Challenges program, which is independent. Sovereignty means being able to do what you want, and that also applies to the Court Challenges program. It has sovereignty. Separation means being divided from someone else.
Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Ethics Commissioner released a report saying that Liberal Joe Pescasolido, quote, chronically failed to take reasonable steps to prevent his non-compliance with the Code's disclosure obligations, end quote. It's not surprising given the Prime Minister has been found in violation of the Act 6 times himself. The profound lack of ethics in the Liberal caucus is astounding. When will the Prime Minister order some remedial ethics courses for his government, and will he commit to take a front seat at the class?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the member in question is no longer in this House, so I don't see what this has to do with the government's management.
The Honourable Member for Stormont Dundas, South Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, nearly 2 months ago, I questioned the government about serious delays in federal funding for key infrastructure projects that have already received the approvals from municipalities and the Ontario government. The House was assured at the time that there was a fund there and they were ready to help. Councils are now wrapping up their 2020 budgets and need to issue tenders immediately, and they still don't have an answer 9 months later after submitting their application. This is so unnecessary. Why does it need to take so long to get federal approval for projects that already have the support from every other level of government?
The Honourable Minister for Rural Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for his concern for communities across the country. When we invested over $180 billion over the next 10 years to support communities, our colleagues across the aisle voted against it.
Shame.
When we ran on a commitment to invest in Canadians, they ran on a commitment to cut infrastructure.
Shame.
We look forward to continuing our investments so that every community, small or large, can prosper.
Here, here.
Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, dairy processor Saputo is laying off 280 workers, including at a plant in Trenton, right next to my riding. This comes after the Liberal government injected millions of dollars to this company. Saputo is a billion-dollar company. It's hardly the family-run business the Minister said the Minister of Agriculture said would help. Over and over, we see that well-connected Canadians are given access to government, while hard-working Canadians are left out in the cold. Can the Minister tell us why the government is giving handouts to companies that are laying people off in the Bay of Quinte?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Monsieur le Président, vous savez à quel point notre gouvernement est
our government is extremely sensitive to the needs of farmers across the country, particularly dairy farmers. We have set up a number of different programs to help them and to help investors. We're disappointed that a big company like Saputo will be closing its doors. Of course, my thoughts are with the workers and their families who are affected, and we will see how we can follow up with that situation.
For Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, Canada used to be recognized around the world as a country that took care of others. We punched above our weight in peacekeeping and poverty reduction. But thanks to Conservative and Liberal cuts, Canada's lost that leadership, and we are now the lowest we've been in over 50 years. For social, economic, and diplomatic reasons, this is really bad. Mr. Speaker, when will this government commit to real, predictable dollar increases in our support of the poorest and most vulnerable people on this planet? When will the Prime Minister actually be back?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague who has considerable experience in international development for raising this important question. I'd also like to acknowledge that this week is International Development Week, a chance for all of us to come celebrate our achievements in international development. I am very proud of the work that we've done introducing the Feminist International Assistance Policy, which has placed Canada in a leadership role when it comes to gender equality, sexual health and reproductive rights on the world stage. I'm also extremely proud of our commitment to Thrive, which was working with civil society organizations to make Canada a leader in global health. Mr. Speaker, Canada is there, and we are committed to helping the world.
The Honourable Member for Churchill, Kawatnuka-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, this morning a terrifying accident shook the people of Guernsey, Saskatchewan. This comes just a year after the derailment of a CP train in BC that killed Dylan Parody, Andrew Dockrell, and Daniel Waldenberger-Bulmer. What have we learned from Lac Mégantic? The Transportation Safety Board is limited. The rail companies continue to put profits over the lives of workers and safety of communities. Deregulation has proven deadly. So what is this government doing to ensure justice for the 3 men killed and safety for communities like Guernsey and so many others across Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, we're indeed very concerned about the derailment that occurred just outside of Guernsey, Saskatchewan this morning, and that is why I've put in place a ministerial order which is going to reduce the speed of trains carrying dangerous goods for the next 30 days as we examine why these derailments are happening. As you know, this is the second derailment in the area in the last 2 months.
The member for Guelph.
This year, Canada is hosting its first World Circular Economy Forum in Toronto, where industry leaders will have important discussions on building a circular economy that benefits people, the economy, and the environment. I know Guelph and Wellington County will be there promoting our Smart Cities initiative that's focused on creating Canada's first circular food economy. Will the Minister of Environment and Climate Change please speak to the significance of this year's International Forum? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for Guelph for his question and his advocacy on strong climate action. This year's World Circular Economy Forum will be the first in North America, and it is an opportunity for Canada to showcase its talent on the world stage. Canadian companies are at the forefront of clean technology, and many of our homegrown innovations involve zero waste. By bringing together business and thought leaders from around the world and sharing innovative ideas that help us reuse, remanufacture, and create new economic opportunities, Canada can be a leader in clean jobs of the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, the closure and smelter in Belledune, New Brunswick, the province is hoping that a $1 billion iron ore processing facility will fill the void. It is expected to create 1,300 short-term jobs and more than 200 permanent jobs. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals claim that the environment and the economy go hand in hand, but then constantly throw up roadblocks that hurt Atlantic provinces. It's continuously no with this government, and New Brunswick deserves a yes. Will the Liberals work with the province of New Brunswick and support the Maritime Iron Project and the hundreds of jobs it will create?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The economy and the environment certainly need to go together as we move forward, but the honourable member should know that the project in question, the issue in question is the emissions of greenhouse gases, is entirely a provincial issue. Premier Higgs has a climate plan and a target, and it's up to him to determine how he's going to meet those emissions targets.
The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said one of his most important roles was to protect jobs. Did he mean only certain jobs were worthy of his protection? He has failed to acknowledge the softwood lumber crisis in British Columbia. He didn't put it in the mandate letter for the minister. The so-called softwood lumber action plan expired a while ago, and a lot of the money got doled out to provinces that weren't even suffering from softwood tariffs. Will the minister stand up today and commit to helping rural Canadians impacted by this forestry crisis? The
Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
I'd like to thank the honourable member for the question, and as the member is from BC, I would like to also thank Premier Horgan, with whom I spoke at length yesterday about a trip that I am making to Washington tomorrow to work on softwood lumber and NAFTA and aluminum and other issues. Premier Horgan works closely with our federal government. Softwood lumber is a priority, and I want to congratulate BC producers on the important recent commerce ruling, which has confirmed, as we have long said, the fairness of our softwood lumber industry.
The
honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Well, that's all fine and well, Mr. Speaker, but the problem is that the wood industry is not just concentrated in one sector. It's across the country. It's 60,000 jobs in Quebec. It's $18 billion. It's a huge amount of money. And under the new NAFTA, or NAFTA 2.05, it's going to affect the forestry sector. Can the minister explain why nothing's been done? Can she explain the situation to Canadians? Mr. Speaker, I have a great deal of respect for the honourable member opposite, but I must say that he is mistaken. The new NAFTA agreement does a great deal for the lumber industry. It is essential for the lumber industry because the new NAFTA agreement gave us Chapter 19, which is essential for the softwood lumber industry. The new agreement guarantees a market for wood. For these reasons, I would encourage the Conservatives to not be involved in squabbling solely and to support ratification of this agreement. The honourable member for Calgary-Shepherd. The Tech Frontier project represents a $20.6 billion investment in the economy of northern Alberta. 10,000 jobs hinge on the decision. If reconciliation with First Nations means anything, it must also mean saying yes to economic development for Indigenous peoples. Allow me to quote Premier Jason Kenney. If the Liberal government doesn't say yes to this project, it means they are going to be bent on eliminating oil sands and thousands of Alberta jobs. On Tech Frontier, is the Liberal government simply afraid of saying yes to Premier Jason Kenney? The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Elected this government to protect the environment, to take climate action, to grow the economy, and to advance reconciliation. They also expect this government to oversee fair and thorough environmental assessments. This is a major project that is under active consideration by our government. Under the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, a decision on this project must be made before the end of February. The government will consider a range of factors, including economic and environmental impacts, in making a decision.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, since the spring, we've been calling on the government to be transparent, to no avail. They hem and they haw and they dodge the question. They're incapable of being clear. The Minister of Justice keeps saying he is opposed to Bill 21 and even invited Quebecers this week to challenge it before the courts. Can the Minister of Justice be clear and commit to not taking Quebecers' money to challenge legislation adopted in Quebec that has the massive support of the people of Quebec? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we were extremely clear that bill was debated and adopted by the Quebec National Assembly. The Quebec legislation was enacted. It is being challenged by other Quebecers, and we are following this with a great deal of interest, period. The honourable member. Maybe they don't seem to be aware of anything, even though they're in the government. The minister had invited a group to challenge Bill 21. That's what must be done, he said. A group did so. It received money from Ottawa, and the government says, oh, we haven't got anything to do with that. They're taking us for fools, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister tell us if his government plans to give more money to other groups in any way, through any program, to challenge legislation legitimately adopted by elected officials in Quebec? And my question is for the Minister of Justice, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, when someone gets all worked up like that, it's all fine and well. I defend my communities like that, but this has to be done based on facts. No funding was transferred to the school board, Mr. Speaker. The legislation was adopted in the Quebec National Assembly. It's being challenged by others, and we're simply monitoring the situation.
Monsieur le Président.
The honourable member. Mr. Speaker, from the 11th to the 14th of October 2019, public servants working at 70 Crémazie and Gatineau got the surprises of their lives when they were forced to work from home because the entire building had to be treated for bed bugs. And it cost more than $300,000 of taxpayers' money to undertake this process. Can the Minister of Public Works ensure the House that protocols to prevent infestation have been taken so that this type of situation doesn't happen again in the future for the benefit of public servants and Canadian taxpayers? Mr. Speaker, our government takes the well-being of its employees very seriously. We collaborated in close cooperation with the owners to attenuate any future issues of this type.
Mr. Speaker, it is clear this Liberal government does not understand basic economics. No. When a company raises its prices, consumers look to other suppliers. Right. This is the case for Canada Post, which just raised the price of stamps. With volumes declining and costs to Canadians and Canada's small and medium-sized businesses increasing, what is the minister's plan for Canada Post to attain financial sustainability?
Good question. The Honourable Minister for Public Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. Our government has introduced a new vision for Canada Post that puts service front and center and fulfills our platform commitment. Part of that vision includes reinvesting in Canada Post's services and innovations. A renewed Canada Post will provide high-quality service at a reasonable price to Canadians, no matter where they live. We look forward to working with the members opposite to resolve any further issues.
Member for Carleton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Through you, Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind the minister that her mandate letter calls on her to keep Canada Post services at a, quote, reasonable price. Whoops. Raising postage rates is clearly not a way to do that. Yeah. The most recent Canada Post annual report shows an increase by 12% in the deferred revenue related to stamps and other postage. Can the minister explain this change?
Good question. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have taken immediate actions to support our new Service First vision, including terminating the community mailbox conversion program, enhancing the accessible delivery program, reinvesting profits in Canada Post services and innovations instead of paying them as a dividend to the federal government, promoting Canada Post remittance services, and renewing Canada Post's leadership.
The honourable member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, housing in my is at a crisis level. 43 of all homes in Northwest Territories either have affordability, suitability, or adequacy issues. Although our government has invested significantly in housing, We know more needs to be done. There is immediate need to invest directly in housing in order to improve the lives of Indigenous people in the Northwest Territories. Mr. Speaker, could the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development update us on what is being done to address this? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister.
I'm sorry. I thank the honourable member for his leadership and his strong advocacy on this really important issue. Our government is committed to supporting the housing needs of northern communities and Indigenous peoples living in the north. That is why we have signed bilateral housing agreements with all 3 territorial governments and are investing $639 million in affordable housing through the National Housing Strategy. In addition to that, we are committed to invest $1.5 billion in affordable housing projects in Métis, First Nations, and Inuit communities, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Edmonton West.
Mr. Speaker, sometimes the government gets a taste of its own medicine when dealing with government red tape. From papers tabled by this government, we've learned that completion of a simple project to build needed jetties at CFB Esquimalt has been delayed for 4 years because of government regulations, new government regulations. Now, can the Minister of Public Services Procurement tell this House what measures are being taken to deal with these regulations imposed by Fisheries and Oceans that are delaying yet another government project?
The Honourable Minister for Public Services.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Our government is creating economic benefits and good middle-class jobs for Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Our record includes a fully costed defense policy, launch of future fighter jet procurement for 88 modern fighters, delivery of first interim jets. 90% of our procurements are delivered within their planned scope and budget.
I'm just going to interrupt the Honourable Minister for a second. There seems to be some chatter and some. I'm not even sure if it's heckling anymore. There seems to be a disinterested group in the House, and I can't really make sure on both sides while the questions are being answered, or questioned, and while they're being answered. So I would ask the honourable members, if they're going to talk amongst themselves, please try to whisper and not talk very loud. Chuchoter en français, vous avez raison. Alors,
whisper in French, yes, that's the term.
From boots to ships, we will continue to ensure Canada's military is well equipped.
The honourable member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, a new report shows that Canada has dropped to its lowest level in at least a decade in a global index of corruption under this Liberal government. Wow. Now, this must be part of what the Prime Minister means when he claims Canada is back. Can the Minister for Public Services and Procurement tell Canadians how many companies are listed as suppliers with administrative agreements under the federal government's integrity regime, and which ones are they?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government is modernizing procurement practice so that they are simpler, they require less paperwork, and support members of our communities that have been historically left out. We are taking action by implementing a simplified contract model to remove barriers to participation and improving existing procurement tools, and we will continue to work with the members opposite to further this initiative.
The honourable member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
A defense contractor doing business with Canada was recently a victim of a ransomware cyber attack exposing the government of Canada and its sensitive operational and commercial information. Now, defense procurement contains highly classified military requirements and capabilities, and yet the Department of Public Services and Procurement simply said, we're going to do better. When classified material falls into the hands of hackers, you don't get a do-over. How can Canadians trust this procurement minister and these Liberals with the protection of Canada's highly classified defense and security information?
The Honourable Minister of Defence.
We take these things extremely seriously. Mr. Speaker, if the previous, if a member opposite
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm having a hard time hearing. Oh, it sounds like it's quieted down. I'll let him continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because as a member opposite knows, we take their security extremely. When it comes to our procurement, we took the utmost look into making sure that we look at cyber protection. We go through the proper requirements, Mr. Speaker, and the Communication Security Establishment is the agency that looks after this, Mr. Speaker, and we have the right people to do this work, to making sure that we have the right safeguards for all our procurement. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable Member for York Centre.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents in New York Centre regularly share with me their deep concerns about the BDS movement and the alarming rise of anti-Semitism in Canada and around the world. Last month, as part of the Governor-General's delegation to the World Holocaust Forum in Israel and the Auschwitz commemoration in Poland, I had the opportunity to reaffirm Canada's strong resolve to fight anti-Semitism, including by formally adopting the IRA definition. With this in mind, can the Minister of Foreign Affairs reiterate Canada's position on BDS?
Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the member of York Centre for his question and obviously for his advocacy on this very important issue. Canada is and will always be a steadfast ally of Israel. Canada remains very concerned about any effort to single out or isolate Israel internationally. And let me be firm and clear to all Canadians, we condemn BDS, Mr. Speaker. As a country, we need to urgently address the resurgence of anti-Semitism at home and abroad. We will continue to stand with the Jewish community in Canada and around the world, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cowichan-Malahat-Langford.
Mr. Speaker, the opioids crisis is getting so bad it's actually driving down life expectancy. In communities across my riding, first responders and families are dealing with compassion fatigue and burnout. We are at a breaking point. The everyday problems associated with the crisis are a constant reminder of the failure of the Liberal government. So will they finally call it what it is, a national health emergency? Will they work with my communities and communities across Canada to finally turn the tide on this crisis?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I share his deep alarm and concern about the opioid crisis that has been in effect for very many years, ever since before I was a politician, and I certainly will work diligently with the member opposite to look at all solutions. Let me just talk about the Liberal government's record on this, though. When we were first elected, we restored harm reduction to the Canada drug policy after it had been removed by the Conservative government, because we know that actually when people are seeking harm reduction services, they want to live. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of our record on the work that we're doing. We have a tremendous amount more to go, and I look forward to that work with the member opposite and all.
The Honourable Member for Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, today's enforcement action in Wet'suwet'en Territory was another humiliating stain on Canada's relationship with Indigenous people. The Canadian Constitution and the United Nations recognize the rights and title of Indigenous people. The Supreme Court recognizes the Indigenous hereditary systems of government. Nation-to-nation negotiations are the responsibility of this government. Mr. Speaker, why has the government abandoned its duty and allowed the constitutional and legal rights of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs to be violated today?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, reconciliation is a crucial priority for our government, and we are committed to renewing our relationship with Indigenous people. We will continue with the necessary work of building partnerships, which is based on rights, respect, and cooperation. The Commissioner of the RCMP is mandated to lead in the support of that site that's in a way that supports reconciliation, and we will continue to protect the constitutional rights to peaceful protest. Mr. Speaker, RCMP officers are and have been in regular communication with the Wet'suwet'en elected councils and hereditary chiefs, as well as the protesters, to promote a constructive dialogue aimed at peaceful resolutions.
That's all the questions and answers for today. I would like to draw the attention of the honourable members to the presence in the gallery of the winners of the 2019 Arctic Inspiration Prize. These 8 teams from across Canada's Arctic are recognized for their innovative projects to improve the quality of life in their communities. I'm going to name all 8, if you don't mind holding on and clapping after I'm done. The winning teams are Northern Compass, Decho River Journeys, Nunavut Law Program, Resilience Training and Healing Program, Kamajit Program, Baffin Youth Outdoor Education Project, Yukon Youth Healthcare Summit, and Trades of Tradition. Pursuant to order made earlier today, the House will, I've just started the question, so maybe we'll take it after the vote, if that's okay. Pursuant to order made earlier today, the House will not proceed to, or will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion at the second reading of Bill C-4. Call in the members. Now, before we go to the question, do we all know the rules? The question is as follows. Ms. Freeland, seconded by Ms. Jordan, moved that Bill C-4, an act to implement the agreement between Canada, the United States of America, and the United Mexican States, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on International Trade. All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Mr. Macaulay-Cardigan.
Mr. Macaulay-Cardigan.
Mr. Sajjan.
Mr. Sajjan.
Madame Joly.
Madame Joly.
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Blair.
Ms. Haidu.
Ms. Haidu.
Mr. Duclos.
Mr. Duclos.
Ms. Qualtrough.
Ms. Qualtrough.
Ms. Freeland. Mr. Morneau. Mr. Champagne. Mr. Lemaitre.
Mr. Lemaitre.
Ms. Bennett.
Ms. Bennett.
Mr. Baines.
Mr. Baines.
Ms. Monsef.
Ms. Monsef.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Miller.
Ms. Chager.
Ms. Chager.
Ms. McKenna.
Ms. McKenna.
Mrs. Schultz.
Mrs. Schultz.
Mr. Carr.
Mr. Carr.
Mr. Easter.
Mr. Easter.
Ms. Ratanzi.
Mr. Ratanzi.
Mr. McKay.
Mr. McKay.
Ms. Groh.
Ms. Groh.
Ms. Fry.
Ms. Fry.
Mr. Regan.
Mr. Regan.
Mr. McGinty.
Mr. McGinty.
Mr. Scarpaleggia.
Mr. Scarpaleggia.
Mr. Bagnall.
Mr. Bagnall.
Mr. Oliphant.
Mr. Oliphant.
Ms. Annan.
Ms. Annan.
Ms. Murray.
Ms. Murray.
Mr. Guilbeault.
Mr. Guilbeault.
Mr. Holland.
Mr. Holland.
Madame Fortier.
Madame Fortier.
Mr. Garneau.
Mr. Garneau.
Ms. Gould.
Ms. Gould.
Mr. Hussain.
Mr. Hussain.
Mr. Mendicino.
Mr. Mendicino.
Madame de Boutillier.
Madame de Boutillier.
Madame Bibeau.
Madame Bibeau.
Mrs. Jordan.
Mrs. Jordan.
Mr. Vandal.
Mr. Vandal.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Housefather.
Mr. Fillmore.
Mr. Fillmore.
Mr. Casey.
Mr. Casey.
Mr.